Hello, EDUC 2331 students. This is your instructor, Stacy, and I'm here to talk with you about Module 2. So remember, this is a super fast course. We go from, we're done in 8 weeks, and so we're on moving into Module 2 now, week 2, starting tomorrow. I know it's Sunday. It hasn't officially started yet. However, I always like to give some of you that want to get started on the weekend a little bit of a jump start. And I see several of you have posted in the discussion board your drafts of your project for this week. They've been amazing. I've given you some feedback. I've been most impressed about the feedback you've been giving one another. And I hope that you're starting to see that giving feedback and being able to see what other people are doing is just as useful as doing the activity, working on it yourself. And I was Zooming with someone in our class this week, and something that we talked about was that when you start to write IEPs, and this is one of the reasons I teach a class this way with the discussion boards and posting our work is you're always going to be sharing your work with other people. It's not like creating IEPs as a private sort of activity. Every people are going to be seeing your work and they're going to be reading it and you're going to be going back and forth with other people on the IEP team and giving feedback. So I want to provide you a safe place to get used to your writing being public because outside of social media and things like that, right? And in a lot of times, for a lot of you, maybe you haven't had to have your work be public. And in a lot of teaching, if you teach English or social studies or something, that also could be a space where I start to think about it now. You might not share your work, right? Like what would you share publicly? I mean, maybe feedback to students. But as a special ed teacher, you're putting products out there, evaluations, reports, IEPs out there publicly for other people to see, and you're collaborating a lot. So that's why I'm doing this. I want you to, when you're out there as special educators, I want you to feel confident and comfortable about sharing your writing with others and giving and getting feedback, okay? And so you're doing amazing with that, but I always just like to reiterate, I'm not doing it because I'm like crazy or, trying to do something because I think it's fun or interesting. Everything that we do in this class, there's a specific reason and purpose, okay? I need you to trust me with that, even if it doesn't quite make sense initially. So we are going to be moving into week 2, module 2. I'm going to click on content. I'm in student view. Let me see. Sorry, that's so I'm going to go down to module 2. And here we go. So now we're moving in from law to practice. We're going to start putting together the IEP, the Individualized Education Plan, the IEP framework, okay? So our learning outcomes, we're going to explain the importance of non-discriminatory evaluation practices. We're going to identify all required IEP components and their purposes. And then you're going to be creating visual representations of the IEP structure and flow. Once again, when I was meeting with a student this week, I was a former special education director and a special education teacher. And one thing that it's important to know is when you come out of wherever you're learning to be a special educator, right, your licensure program, you're going to know a little bit about writing IEPs, but it's just really impossible to get good at it until you actually are in the setting and writing them on your own and working with real students. We do the best we can in programs like we have at Normandale to do that, but I just want you to know as long as you're continuing to make progress and you're continuing to learn and grow, that it will come together, but it's likely not going to come together for a few years down the road when you're actually in the classroom, okay? And when you're in your school setting as a special education director, I know that part of our job is to provide support for new special education teachers around this. So you will have the support that you need in mentoring. Okay, with that aside, and a little bit of a pep talk, you're going to do readings this week from chapters 1 and 2. Chapter 1 is continued, chapter 2 in our course text. And then you're going to work on section 2 of your portfolio with your case study student. And like I said, this week we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of IEPs, and we're going to keep doing little pieces throughout the course. So we're going to do the high level overview this week, okay? And it's titled Developing Your IEP Framework Analysis. So you're going to create required IEP components checklist with explanations specific to your chosen student, right? So you're used to this project. You're going to learn about different things to do with IEPs and then apply to your student, right? And then you're designing an annotated visual diagram mapping the IEP components with your students' needs highlighted. So that sounds like a lot. I know I should have actually not had so much mumble jumble there. Basically, what it means is you're going to draw a picture, an illustration of how the whole IEP process works. And this is really key because you need to start to develop your understanding of it, because when you start to work with families and general education teachers and things in schools, they're also going to look at you to explain the process. So just getting more and more comfortable having some tools at your disposal to help with that. The annotated visual diagram, that can be typed, it can be fancy. I'll show you one that I did. It can be handwritten, it can be a table, that you create in a Word document. So whatever works for you. We also want to really talk about applying the non-discriminatory evaluation principles to your students' assessment needs. And also connecting to explicitly to cultural responsiveness and bias-free practices with concrete examples. So in my years as a special education teacher and a special education director, one of the things that I saw the most happening was in our school system, students struggle, and a lot of times the only supports we have are IEPs. And schools were not very good at figuring out, like, are there things going on that have to do with culture, that have to do with our internal biases, things like that? Are there things about our evaluation process that we're qualifying students for special education when really they might just need a different learning environment? They might need different materials. English might be a second language. That doesn't mean they're automatically going to be special ed if they have learning needs. And so we're really not good at all with that cultural lens and thinking about that. So I really want to push you all on that. Story I have is when I was a special education director in Deer River, so northern Minnesota, up here in Itasca County, large population of Native American students. We were always getting cited for overrepresenting Native American students on IEPs. And I did a lot of work around that. It wasn't perfect. It's hard oftentimes when you're dealing with teachers in schools that are predominantly white teachers, and they are not really understanding the Native American culture, right? And so that culturally responsive lens is important. So Deer River, case in point, almost any student that struggled, especially behaviorally, it was a Native American student would go on an IEP, and that wasn't okay. And it takes a lot of work, and it takes leadership to help with that. But ultimately, at the student level, special education teachers and educators in general can start to be advocates and start to notice those things and really start to build in things for all students, for example, that might be Native American in that situation. So anyway, that's my little anecdote for today. And I still think about that school a lot, and the work that they're continuing to do there. So what we're going to do for our discussion board, starting tomorrow, I'd like you to do a post in our week 2 discussion board about what you learned in week 1, what you took away from that, and what do you want to work on as you move into week 2. So a little bit of a reflection, getting you on the discussion board, engaging with one another, right? We're not doing this alone. Then by Wednesday, I want you to share a draft IEP framework analysis for peer review, and I'll show you an example below. Friday, by then, I'd like you to provide structured feedback to at least 2 peers using the provided rubrics. I'll show you those. And then next Monday at noon, so once again, so I think that's Monday, I think it's the 8th. Let's see, double check here. So by, yes, Monday the 8th at noon, discussion board will close for posting. You can look at it, after Monday the 8th at noon, but you just won't be able to post anything, okay? The reason I do that is because we really have to stay on our timelines, because I want you to all be successful in this course. Okay, so to do discussion board 2, this basically what I just talked about here is laid out step by step for you here. Part 1, Monday the 1st, part 2, part 3, okay? Here's a provided rubrics. If we click on this, the one to think about for this specific project, the IEP portfolio, would just be like, are all the required components for this week there? Is there, are you showing a clear grasp of concepts with detailed explanations, or is it really surface level? Resources are polished and ready for immediate use, meaning you could use those in whatever setting you're going to be in. Maybe they need revisions. Your format, I'm really not as big on this, but presentation is important. So is it clean, organized, error-free, professional, or does it need some work? And then this is the thing that I'm really going to push you on, is a thoughtful application, clear evidence, a deep thinking about how to implement in real classrooms, or over here limited. So in addition to all the other great feedback you've been providing, be thinking about those things. It's a pass or fail. It's pretty straightforward, which I like to keep everything, if you may not have noticed. Okay, so here is my pro tips for you in doing this assignment that you'll post on the discussion board this week and give and get feedback. So I have another example of Tyler. And so you'll use that to help create similar materials for your case study student, okay? And so you'll want to share the following on the discussion boards. I chose to do the assignment for this week in 2 documents, but you can combine them into 1 document or use another format that makes sense for you. Below is a brief overview. I just wanted you to have an idea, right? To start with, you might be thinking, well, how am I going to learn about all this stuff? Well, do your readings in your textbook, watch the videos. Also, many of you work in schools. I would be taking this assignment to school and kind of having it in my pocket or on my phone. And when I get a chance, I'm working with special education teachers, might be sitting in the, somewhere having lunch. Pick their brains. Anyone at your disposal, use anything at your disposal to get ideas and to get input and to get tips, because that's what we do in special ed all the time. It's also okay to search online for additional examples. So the first thing that I did was I went and created an IEP components checklist with explanations, okay? And so here's just some examples of how I did it for Tyler. And this is where you're really going to build in the non-discriminatory evaluation principles and the culturally responsiveness, okay? And so when I go down here, I click on this. Here's my example for that part 1, okay? So you see, basically the components checklist is we're talking about evaluation number 1. What is it? Here's how it connects to Tyler, right? Non-discriminatory evaluation, culturally responsive bias and practices, those go together. Then concrete examples for Tyler. Then potential idea categories for Tyler. And there's a link in your text to read about some of these. So where do we think he might qualify? That's what I said. And this is a rule out, but maybe he does qualify for ED, okay? Then we move on to present levels. What is it? Tyler. Annual goals, we'll get into that a little bit more in some of the other modules. Just basically, what is it? How does it apply to Tyler? We're not writing any goals or anything yet. We're just kind of figuring out what is strengths and needs, related services. As you see, we go on down the line, okay? And then you'll read about all this stuff. If it's not quite enough for you, watch videos, talk with the people that you're working with that are in special education at your schools. So what you could do is you could remove, you could just go with the headings that I have here and do that for your student if you wanted to. So evaluation procedures, okay, explain what it is in your own words, and then for your student, right? Okay, then we're going to try to get out of this. Then we're going to go to part 2, which is that visual, right? The annotated visual diagram. You can write it and you can handwrite it if you want. You can use fancy tools like, in Word, you can use SmartArt, Google Sites, Canva, whatever you want to do. So the thing is, you want to show how each IEP component directly connects to your student's needs, okay? So here's the one I made for Tyler. I did do it in a fancy program. You don't have to. But basically, this is what I did. So I took the components for Tyler. This is something really cool that I could actually share, with people when I'm getting ready for an IEP meeting, the team, and we're kind of planning the IEP. Here's kind of the key things we need to think about for Tyler: evaluation procedures, right? Potential idea categories, present level of performance, right? Annual goals. Here's ones we might want to think about. And you just see it goes on and on. So it's really short and brief and to the point about key things to think about as it as it pertains to my student, Tyler, when it comes to evaluating and creating an IEP for him, if he were to qualify. We're going to probably assume in this class that everyone qualifies. Because when you get into schools and actually do evaluations, you'll be part of the team, but usually there's a school psychologist, school social workers, and others that will do a lot of, that will lead that. And then they will bring you on to do certain pieces. And then if a student qualifies, then you'll go ahead and take that information and create the IEP. So, and I also believe in your coursework at some point, if you're going to get a special ed license, you also take an assessment course where we dig deeper into this. I've taught that several times in other institutions. So over the next week, this is what you're going to do. Your same case study student, you have what you did from week 1, your legal and ethical framework. Now you're going to build on that, and you're going to create an IEP components checklist and then a diagram about what about key things to think about when it comes to your case study student, okay? Please reach out if you have any questions or concerns. I will be jumping on the discussion board, probably not tomorrow on Labor Day, but on Tuesday. Once you start to get things posted, I'll be popping in there. I've also given some of you discussion board grades already for this week. Basically, it's a pass-fail, as long as you engage and do it and give one another feedback. And I also went in and looked at your getting to know you assignments. It's not graded, but it was very helpful. I'm starting to feel like I know each of you a little bit more. So you have not finished your discussion board for this week, or if you've not done that getting to know you post, please do that as soon as you can. And that's all for now. See you in our class.